Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back to The Wilder Ride, where we are getting wilder by the minute, a podcast breaking down and celebrating the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. I'm one of your hosts, I'm Alan Sanders.
And I'm your co-host, Walt Murray.
And joining us today is someone who's no stranger to other podcasts. We've got Sean German on with us from Spinal Tap Minute, the newly started Groundhog Minute, and the ever-popular 5 Minutes of Mime. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Since this is our first time to have you with us in this Castle von Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, give us a little background of who you are and how you got involved doing movies by minutes.
So yeah, my name is Sean, as you said. I got involved when my great co-host Heidi Bennett was looking for a co-host for Spinal Tap Minute. I replied to a tweet that the Star Wars Minute Boys had forwarded on. I was looking to get into podcasting and specifically the movies by minutes thing, and really didn't have any experience with podcasting before other than as a listener. So I kind of wanted to get in with someone else to kind of help me find my way and learn through things. And as I soon learned, Heidi was in a similar position. She didn't have any experience with podcasting either, but we both made it through together 1 minute at a time. And Spinal Tap wrapped up last summer, and I was hooked. And once you get in it now, every time I watch a movie, I'm going minute by minute. I'm thinking, oh, what am I going to say? Oh, I could say this about this minute. Oh, I want to say that about that minute. And that led to Groundhog Day and possibly more to come, but it's just those at this point.
Well, obviously with a movie like Groundhog Day, the cool thing is you get to rewatch certain minutes over and over and over without actually backing the movie up.
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of like a movie that's strangely pre-made in that movies by minutes mold. And we're at this recording, we're still early on in the movie, but we're already getting to those parts where things repeat. And yeah, it's a good thing we like to watch the same thing over and over again and dig into the minutia, because we just get even more of a chance when the director says, okay, you think you've had enough of that scene? I'm going to show it to you again. And it's going to be the same day and the same events, but we're going to twist it a little bit this time.
Last week for us here on the podcast, we had a true actor who has been in a lot of different things, including a Clint Eastwood production, the movie Sully, where he had a scene with Tom Hanks. He did The Walking Dead. He was on Ozark. And we talked about continuity. When you've been going through Groundhog Day so far, how much have you caught in terms of continuity errors, or do you think some of those were intentional to make every day look a little different?
They've been really good about keeping things aligned, and not everything's exact, but we've had to get really down into the slightest bit of the minutia to really catch them. One of the things they did when they were filming Groundhog Day is all the scenes that happen in the same quote unquote time of day and in the same place, they filmed in order. So they didn't film in the order that we see things in the movie, but all the scenes with, for example, when Ned first comes up to Phil in the morning as he's walking to Gobbler's Knob and Ned first recognizes him, they filmed all those in sequence, and all the different scenes with Mrs. Lancaster at the bed and breakfast, for example. They filmed those together in a row. So they're, at least in terms of the costume and the set dressing and the setup and those kind of things, those have all been consistent. And they really did, I think, an amazing job with the background characters as well, the extras. And you can see as Phil's walking down the street, you've got the same cars driving past at close to the same amount of time. And it's close enough that you can always say, well, as Phil is figuring out what is going on with this loop that he's stuck in, he's doing things a little bit different every day. So even if everyone else is supposed to be doing the same thing, he's a little bit different. So the time he's walking down the street is going to be a little bit different. The amount of time it takes for him to get ready to where he's walking through the lobby of the hotel where he's staying, he may be a few minutes earlier or later. So we kind of explain away the differences like that. I've been impressed as a layman, not someone involved in the making of movies, but certainly someone who's watched movies and dug into the minutia of minute by minute. The job that they did And it helps keep the focus on those things that are different, that the things that are supposed to be the same. For the most part, they've done a pretty good job with.
Awesome. Well, we are so happy to have you here and your background and experience. Before we dive into minute number 26, take a second and tell us about your podcast, 5 Minutes of Mime. Because when I explained to my wife that you had a podcast, 5 Minutes of Mime, she said, wait, aren't mimes quiet? What do we have, 5 minutes of silence? Is this meditation? So tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions on the Mime Show, on the 5 Minutes of Mime. And yeah, so this was when I was just starting out. It started around the time as I started with Spinal Tap Minute, and I wanted to get into podcasting. And I know, occasionally you get a natural. Someone takes to something and they're good right away. But I know that's kind of the exception. For most people in most things, it requires practice. Requires dedication and repetition to get things right. And I'm like, I really want to do the movies by minutes thing. I want to get it right. Let me start something else just to learn about podcasting and editing and posting and kind of the technical side. And I'm like, it's supposed to be a learning experience, the process of podcasting. I don't want to spend all my time thinking about content. So that led me to think, well, if I do like a performing arts, something where I can bring in artists from the outside and they can provide the content, and then I do an introduction at the beginning and I wrap up at the end and I give the plugs, and I can learn the podcasting process without getting overwhelmed with the content. Mimes work really cheap, it turns out. Singers and actors and people that give speeches, they want to get paid. And as this is sort of a volunteer endeavor. I'm not making there's not a huge amount of money coming in podcasting in general, and certainly when you're just starting out, as I was. And the price was right for the mime. So I'm like, all right, you guys come in and I'll introduce you and you do your mime thing, and then I'll wrap it up and give a little conclusion at the end. So it's not. If anyone's worried, is this a lark? Is this a joke? Is it just 5 minutes of silence that you put up once a week? No, it's actually only about 2 to 2.5 minutes of performance time in the middle of the mime. And then it's some introduction and some education. And for the folks that are like, yeah, if mime's not your thing, we really touch on a lot of different aspects of performing arts. And I think it's something that has a wide appeal and has points of interest for almost everyone during the show.
Awesome. Walt, it's funny what he's saying this. Adam last week, again, our working actor, said how important body language and what you're doing with those white spaces, those non-dialogue moments, can sometimes be as telling, if not more telling, of what's happening in a scene.
Well, we've seen this throughout Young Frankenstein so far, that what is being conveyed through their facial expressions has been as powerful as what they've been conveying through speech and word. So that is a heck of a talent to be able to convey that much emotion and that message through mime. So that's kind of interesting.
Well, let's take that talent and skill set and let's head into the bedroom of the young Frederick Frankenstein, who's just awoken from his nightmare and there's worse things to wake up to from your nightmare than Inga hovering over you. And they hear the violin playing in the background, and suddenly as he slowly comes out of his stupor and realizes that music is actually coming from somewhere within the castle, we'll start off with where is the music coming from, and the minute will end with a bit of a merry-go-round effect in the bedroom. So let's start it off. Sean, I'll hit you up first. In this first minute, or this first few seconds of this minute, both Inga and Frederick are looking off and trying to find out where that sound is coming from. If you can remember back when you first saw Young Frankenstein, what were your thoughts in this minute moving forward?
One of my thoughts is that this is really smart. I think this movement, or this minute, or this scene particularly, a lot of times, and we see it in horror films, and I realize this is a monster movie, not a horror movie, and that's a distinction. But a lot of times you see a movie and the people are just idiots. And some of that's necessity. Obviously, if you're in a haunted house, the smart thing to do is let me get the heck away from this house. Let me run away from the monster. It's kind of like the logical thing. So you need people to be not at their best to keep the movie going and not end after 5 minutes that they just get out of town. But I think this is really intelligent. It sets up that there's a reason these people are here. There's a reason why they might not just run away as soon as something strange happens, but they go through the process of figuring out, like, okay, this is coming from somewhere, and how do we get to the source of this mysterious music? They kind of logically work through things to figure out how to get where they need to go. And I mean, a little bit getting into next minute, but I like just that they're intelligent. They're like real people. They're not artificially, doing seemingly artificially nonsensical things to just keep the plot moving along.
No, when I was thinking about these minutes coming up, because these 5 minutes flow very well together in getting us to where the source of this music is, Walt, what I was thinking, this almost becomes the detective or the mystery rather than a monster picture. We hear a violin. We're not expecting, it's not a creepy noise. It's not the sound of someone sharpening a knife or hearing a groan or something that we would think ordinarily, I'm running the other direction. It spurs curiosity and it puts them on a bit of a mini quest right here.
Well, and I was thinking when I was watching this again that is kind of the way that I would have responded too, that I would have wanted to know what that was, where it was coming from, and kind of hunt down the source. So the actors here and the writing is really strong. It helps, again, to kind of put us in that same situation with the characters as they try to figure this out.
And Sean, I like what you said, because I think Gene Wilder is kind of thought of as that everyman. We can relate to him. He's got a genuineness in his performance. He's got a warmth underneath, even when he's playing, whether he's angry or whether he's frightened or whether he's trying to, I guess, woo somebody. There's always a genuine humanity, the genuine side of him coming from underneath. And so I think he pulls us with us, and we don't think this is a dumb move. We make, as you said, we feel it's the next logical thing. Find out where the violin is coming from.
Yeah. So you start asking, like, first impressions or what I felt about this the first time I saw it, and that's great. But there's a lot more that's going on that I only noticed through repeat viewings. And one of the things I picked up only later is when Froderick repeats the line that Inga has said, and he says, "Behind the bookcase." And that's so funny to me. And I'd like, is he mocking? He says the bookcase, and Froderick, doesn't have an ordinary accent other than his pronunciation of his name. So, like, is he mocking her? Is it, is he just kind of naturally absorbing? Some people will do that if they're around people with an accent without even thinking. They start picking it up. That kind of stands out to me when he says, he starts picking up on Inga's accent and repeating it.
What I loved about him doing it here is it's sort of that, we talked about in earlier minutes, how he's taken on more of the mentor role for now when he realizes that she's got a childlike innocence to her. She's very aware of herself, but she's not a money grubbing she's the opposite of Elizabeth. And so I think what we have here is he hears, while he's trying really hard to concentrate, he hears her say, "Behind the bookcase." And he's like, "Behind the bookcase." He's just repeating exactly what he heard. I don't think he's mocking her. I think he's so lost in his professorial sort of, it's the scientific method. I'm hearing the hypothesis. It's behind the bookcase.
Yeah, he's kind of digesting what she's just said and repeating it back to her. And I'm one of those people that if I go on a trip for a couple of days, I'll come back with that accent. and I think he's kind of doing some of the same thing too, that he's kind of reflecting what she's just said as he's processing it.
It could be that. I remember when I used to work in inside sales and I'd have to call, and I went to all different regions. I found out if I had to deal with somebody up in, let's say, the Bronx or New Jersey, and they were very quick and very sharp and very pointed, and you would sometimes in the South here take that as being rude. When I acted that same way back, I got everything done. It's almost like they could identify with me more, which I thought was the weirdest thing. I thought he was going to get mad at me for taking on some of his or her mannerisms, but the minute I sounded more like them, they were like, "Oh, okay, I'm dealing with somebody I can relate to."
Yeah, no, and if you can pattern your speech after the other person that you're talking to, it pulls them into that conversation. I don't think he's consciously doing that, but I think it is one of his manners.
Well, they head on over quickly. He asks for the robe, to which she hands him his robe, and they head over to one of two different bookcases. And what I love about the development of the scene is, we talked about this so far, Walt, throughout this movie. They're not rushing scenes. This isn't, Zack Snyder saying, "I've got to have an explosion every 3 seconds to keep my audience." We're slowly looking about the room. It's now about finding the lever or finding the secret passage or finding where the music is coming from. And I love how it takes its time. It doesn't rush the joke.
No, and this is also the same bookcase that he was just standing in front of a few minutes ago talking to Cloris Leachman. And of course, she knows what the secret is here, but didn't reveal it. So as they approach it, they're kind of coming with new eyes where she knows all the hidden secrets of the castle.
In this moment, what I like about the setup of the first bookshelf, as we get a little deeper into this minute, it's almost perfect framing from the cinematographer's perspective. If you know anything about framing a shot in terms of the quadrants where you almost draw in your lens, if you're filming or taking a picture, if you draw sort of a tic-tac-toe board where you've got the intersection of your lines, your four quadrants are considered places your eye will naturally gravitate towards. So you want your main subject right in those quadrants. And if you look in that upper left quadrant, there is purposefully a white book right there for us to see. So once again, as Frankenstein here, or Frankenstein, is trying to figure out where's the lever, where's the trip, where's the device that's going to flip the bookshelf. We see it and discover that thing, that book that's turned the other way around at the exact same time he does.
When I first saw the movie in the theater when I was a kid, somebody sitting behind me goes, "The book!" And so everybody was drawn to that. It was good framing. And as we've said in this movie before, a good bait and switch for the audience.
Sean, what do you think about that setup? Were you able to see that? And I go trying to look back and remember. It's hard to remember the first time, but what was your thought when he first approached that first bookshelf and made eye contact with the white book turned the wrong way?
Yeah, I'll admit I did not pick up on that before he does. But yeah, once he pulls it out, then it's obvious, and it certainly stands out on repeat viewings that it's the lighter color and that it's turned around. So you've got the pages facing out. And like you said, it just goes to the intelligence and the setup of each scene in this movie.
Well, remember how I said that there are places in the movie where Gene Wilder sort of, it's not like he's talking to us. He doesn't look into the camera, although there are places where that does happen. But he almost realizes, that's kind of silly, or I got played, and almost acknowledging that there's an audience watching him, and he's almost trying to say, I know I got made to look stupid. Here, he literally goes back over his shoulder to Inga, and he's like, that didn't work like I thought it would.
Well, and when he pulled it out, they both jumped.
Oh, yeah, they leaped back.
Really made a conscientious effort to jump back. So it was kind of a funny miss for him.
What I love about it, though, is here's a place where we're setting up the joke. We don't know what the joke is if we're seeing it 1 minute at a time from the very first time. We assume that he thinks he's found the lever for that bookcase to turn it around. So he yanks the book out. They both jump back. Nothing happens, and he feels kind of stupid. He's like, what do I think I'm in? I'm in some kind of a monster movie where they're going to have secret passages? And so he slowly moves his way over to the other bookshelf. Now that we've already decided, okay, obviously there's no secret passages here. It didn't work. He pulls a book out and he just looks kind of silly. And he moves over to the other bookshelf. And I think this is where the brilliance of the writing of this scene, because his motivation for getting up close to the bookshelf is he hears the music stronger. It's like, it's louder from back here. And as he leans his ear, he wants to, for some reason, get a better look and asks for the candle.
Yeah, it was absolutely a perfect play. And so the great scientist before has thought he found the trigger, didn't, moves to the other side, and now they find it by accident.
Sean, when you saw this and she pulls the candle out, and all of a sudden, he wants the candle to be able to see if maybe there's maybe a crack somewhere, maybe a light exposed somewhere. I don't know. He's asking for it to get a closer look at the second bookshelf. Were you taken off guard when that actually spun around on us?
Yeah, so he was kind of right and wrong. Frederick was right that there was some kind of mechanism and a device. He was just wrong in what the trigger was. But yeah, for me, this was a big surprise and a big laugh that suddenly it spins around and then it spins all the way around. And he's seemingly trapped on the other side of whatever's on the other side of this bookcase.
Yeah, I don't understand the physics of this particular device beyond being funny, Walt, because the first time she takes the candle out, totally out, it only spins 180 degrees, trapping him behind the wall, where we get his line, which, by the way, is part of yet another joke that'll come in the next couple of minutes. We hear from behind the bookshelf, "Put the candle back." And this time, you think, well, it spun 180 degrees the first time. You would think it would spin 180 degrees again, bringing him back into the room. But no,
we get
suddenly
a good 360.
Yeah, and the look that we get from Inga at the very end of the minute, she's just like, oh golly, it didn't work.
Well, and his expression too as it spins around.
The first time when he gets trapped, he's looking to his left, and all of a sudden as it starts to spin, he's got this horrified look when he looks to his right, and then back to his left as the bookshelf circles around. He's like, "What the?"
Yeah, this is not going to end well.
And the exasperation, I do love his delivery of "put the candle," like he's figured it out. It didn't take him long. He's like, that's what the triggering mechanism is, the candle. But when she puts it in and he just spins 360 degrees, it's like, well, what the heck? So now he's trapped all over again.
Yeah, they really write and play this scene to a T. This is just so great. And again, this is one of those that's such a simple thing for this movie, but they really nail it and really bring some great humor to it, but also a little bit of a jump scare as it does, spin. So you are in that monster movie, horror movie, but also a comedy, and you're reminded of that as you go through the scene.
Well, Sean, isn't this a typical trope for this kind of film, the horror, monster, scary kind of movie, that there's got to be a secret passage somewhere?
Yeah.
It's like all of them have it.
Well, and I like there's a little bit of, maybe this is putting too much into it. This is probably not something that they were thinking of in making the film, but I like to think of it now as like a wink to the audience that they realize they're in a movie. Because that's, I don't know. I mean, I don't know about the day and age and the place where these characters are in the modern world. These kind of hidden passages and this kind of device are unusual, to say the least, and kind of not the first thing I guess most people will jump to. If they hear a sound and they can't figure out where there's coming from, oh, there must be a secret passage, is not the thing that really happens in real life very often. But like you said, yes, it's sort of a trope. It's something that's very common to these kind of films. So for Frederick to jump into that, there must be a device. You know, I kind of feel like that's a little acknowledgement, like, oh, I'm in a monster movie and I'm in a castle. And of course, castles always have hidden passages and secret devices and all these things going on.
While I was doing my research, if this movie is near and dear to your heart and you're thinking to yourself, how do I go about getting my own secret passage with a bookshelf in front of it? There are actually businesses out there, and I ran across one called Hidden Door Store, where for a mere starting at $10,000, they will build you a custom rotating bookshelf for you to put in your own home.
Well, be sure and share that number with me later. I'll write that check this afternoon.
Well, it says starting at $10,000, so
at 10.
It could go a lot higher. But they will create a rotating bookshelf for you. They will put a triggering mechanism in there for you to unlock the bookshelf, whatever you want. And in fact, they specifically use in their marketing material rotating bookcase like seen in Young Frankenstein.
But what better advertising can there be but that?
I mean, because I'm sold. I have always wanted, don't ask me why, Walt, but I have always, as a kid even, I've always wanted a secret passage, a secret tunnel, a backdoor exit, something that is hidden, like behind a bookshelf or behind a fake painting or behind a faux wall. And I don't know, maybe it's growing up watching Batman, you know, the Adam West Batman, where he would lift the statue, click the button, and the door would slide open to reveal the bat poles. I've always wanted to have something like that.
I've always wanted to have one, but I've never wanted to spend $10,000 on one.
You mean you're not just lying around burning a hole in your pocket saying, I could go to Disney, cruise, I could fly out to the West Coast. No, I want a spinning bookcase.
Yeah, I made the decision years ago to have kids instead of money.
Oh, yeah, that was a big problem for me, too.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you at least stopped one short of me, because I said, 3, what's one more? Now I've got 3 in college, and as soon as one graduates, I'll still have 3 as my youngest graduates in high school, so... What was it like to have money? Sean, you talked about podcasting. Memory. You don't make a whole lot. Parent sometime.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as we start to close off, and I love these minutes because they're going to go very quickly, I think, because it all is really one scene broken up in these little tiny segments, because it's all about the exploration now. We've awoken from the dream. We've established the characters. We're inside the castle. We've seen the portrait on the wall that looks eerily similar, and Frederick needs to understand that now he is very much aligned with Victor, his grandfather. And now we're on the adventure. We're on the quest. I hear something. We have to go discover. And hey, what's a good Dungeons and Dragons game without a secret or hidden door?
Absolutely. And you're getting the sense that there is a payoff to this. And masterfully, we've been brought along for the walking of the path towards becoming Dr. Frankenstein.
And as we end this minute on the basic merry-go-round, which, by the way, perfect analogy, because we keep going around and around, he keeps going around and around, trying to avoid his name, then embrace it, avoid it, and embrace it. We are on this ride all together where we're going in circles, but we're not really necessarily getting anywhere, but it's a fun ride so far.
It is a fun ride so far.
Sean, before we start to wrap up minute 26, from your perspective, from whether it's Groundhog Day or Spinal Tap or 5-Minute Mime, anything that we missed here that your expertise can weigh in on?
No, I think that covers all the notes, all the things I wanted to point out. I'm biting my tongue. I'm holding. There's so much I want to say, but that's everything for minute 26, and I'll save it for the minutes to come, what else I have.
That's perfect, because I was going to ask. We've had so much fun with you today. Do you mind hanging out and coming back over to the castle and trying to play with some secret passages tomorrow?
Oh, an angry mob couldn't drag me away.
Awesome. Well, Sean, why don't you remind everybody again where they can hear some of your minutes, including your fairly new podcast?
Yeah, so if you want to, you can dive back in time to the Spinal Tap Minute, and that's at spinaltapminute.com. But you can hear my current movie podcast at groundhogminute.com, and that's where myself and my co-host Dave Pallas cover the movie Groundhog Day, one repetitive minute at a time.
You know, you could do a whole series on just Bill Murray movies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Bill Murray's always been one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to listen to that podcast because he is. I think he's a crazy genius.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, as Gene Wilder was hitting his stride in the early to mid 70s, and then obviously through into the 80s, Bill Murray was sort of a younger, almost not quite a generation behind, but he was getting his kind of rise through Saturday Night Live, and then eventually becoming a movie actor. So it's almost, I see parallels between Bill Murray and Gene Wilder.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of parallels. I think that Gene Wilder is probably an easier actor to work with, but they both have their own unique genius.
They're both very much comedic geniuses. They don't just rely on one thing to make you laugh, whether it's the pause, the look, the joke, the pratfall. They both are very talented comedians.
Well, and I would go beyond the comedy. There's a seriousness. There's a certain seriousness that Gene has, I think, that gives him a little bit more weight than just your average comedic actor. And Bill has that as well. And that's one of the things that Harold Ramis talks about in casting Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, is that it's a comedy at its base and it's a movie that they wanted people to laugh at. And you have to have a certain affinity for the main character, for Phil Connors, that Bill Murray's playing. But at the same time, he's a bit of a curmudgeon. He can be a bit of a jerk, to say the least, at times. So you need someone who can do the comedy but is believable in the non-comedic parts of that role. And that was something that Bill could do as well.
Both these actors have tremendous depth to be able to do drama, to do everything in between, and yet still keep the fact in mind that if you're in a comedy, you still need to laugh. Walt, if somebody wants to get in depth with our comic genius, or, well, anyway, find out more about us, where would they go?
Whatever it is that we have. Yeah, it would be great if you'd like to join us over on Facebook, www.facebook.com/The Wilder Ride, and find out probably more than you'd even like to know about us. But we'd also love to have you fill in the gaps if we've missed anything on this minute or any of the others, and hear from you about what you think about our podcast so far.
And go to thewilderride.com if you want to know the website location. It has all the links to all of our other social media, including our Patreon page. So you can find us. Just Google The Wilder Ride. At this point in time, you should be able to find us.
I would hope so. We seem to be everywhere. So.
All right. And until tomorrow, minute 27 coming up tomorrow, where we're going to continue the merry-go-round and see if we can't figure out how to get the bookcase to cooperate. And we're going to end with Dr. Frankenstein messing with the very candle that has gotten them into this predicament to start with.
Dr. Frankenstein?
No, Froderick.
Frankenstone?
Put the candle back.